Big data and value of data, my favorite subjects. Data, two concepts initially. Information comes from data. What people often want is information to make informed commercial decisions, and that comes from the availability of data and being able to turn that into something useful. This is something that as a global community we've started to experience a lot more over the last sort of 10, 15 years. Think of Google, every business decision goes, what's the data telling us? Now, in a payroll environment, historically, companies have struggled with data because you've got a country here with this payroll system, a country there with that payroll system, producing different payroll outputs and reporting capabilities, and you need to be able to put that all together and normalize that structure, i.e. make it look and feel the same if you're going to do anything useful with that information. Now, there is a sense of romance around at the moment, as I would call it. People get caught up in the romance of big data. The HR and payroll communities are talking about this, as is most other business streams. But I'm not sure people necessarily understand what it is and what it looks like. So big data for me, and the value of that data is, you have a global organization, you have total workforce costs, but you don't really have any ability to analyze those and say, okay, I'm thinking of moving a manufacturing unit or opening a location in country X. You may want to say, we have a perception that that country is going to be a less expensive place to do business, so it's better for our organization. But actually what you might find is, if you really looked into that through the payroll data and said, okay, we've got higher social security costs, we've got labor laws that mean we have to do X, Y, and Z for our workforce, we've got all these other factors that may mean that that perception of this country being less expensive may not actually be correct. And for me, that's part of what big data is about. Companies now, and us as an organization, we focus in two areas. One is, how do you help the C-suite make better commercial decisions from payroll data that they don't know that they have, that adds serious value to the company when you really start to harness and look at what that data is and what it means to you. The other one is to make payroll managers heroes. So again, Facebook example, Facebook is valuable because of the data that it has, because at some stage, and they have to an extent already, but at some stage somebody will go, this data is really valuable and here is why. And that's why, as a company, it's not because of the revenue that drives Facebook's share value, it's because of the fact that it is a valuable company. And if you look at companies like Safeguard, where we have all this information about our employees, or our customers' employees, and the ability to make that meaningful and useful for a CEO, CFO, CHRO audience, this is huge. Because so far nobody's had access to this information. Nobody has been able to say, give me my total labor costs. Now let me look at that by department. Let me cross-correlate between what job profiles look like in this country versus that country versus another country. Let me compare that with organizational performance. Let me compare that with people performance. Once you start to be able to put all of this data into a warehouse or a container of some description and be able to actually start analyzing that in line with what you want to do as a company, you will find terrific value, but at the moment you just don't know it's there, and you don't have access to it because you've got all these different payroll systems that are reporting things in different ways. So for me, this is huge. Has the payroll industry defined what big data looks like and what it really is? No, it's an evolutionary process, and that's something that, with the availability of better technology, is starting to make much more of an impact. 5 years from now, payroll will be seen as a much more valuable function in a company than it is today. So in some companies it's a value added or value creation department, in others it's a cost center. And I think sometimes people make a mistake of thinking that payroll is this thing we have to do, as long as it works, it's not a problem, it's a thankless profession, as you'd hear a lot of payroll professionals and practitioners saying to you, because if nothing goes wrong in payroll, you never hear a thank you for it. It's just an expected commodity type approach, just like your internet working correctly is. But the value of this data, being able to do something really valuably commercially useful with that, is really, really important. And again, it comes back to conversations we had about strategy. If you want to be able to understand and mine that data properly, you have to set those structures up at the beginning. And our message to companies today is, think about what your CFO, your CEO needs to know 5 years from now. It's not about the today. Prepare for the tomorrow, because if you do that preparation, you do it right now, your organization is going to be significantly more competitive than your competitors are, because you've got data that they don't have. And that for me is what big data is about, and why this is so important to us, and why we're so passionate about it in our market of making sure people get that value. The difficulty that you have in global payroll is nobody's really doing it. So it's this romance of what is big data. Everybody's preparing for it. You know, in my experience, a lot of companies are starting to see a lot more of that. But I don't think anybody's truly said, let me take my organizational data, let me compare it against other companies in my marketplace, let me compare my job profiles against similar job profiles in other countries, and start to put all of that together. And that's kind of the difficulty that people have, is the technology is kind of only just getting to the point where that's becoming more mainstream in terms of consolidation and normalization. But it isn't really there yet in terms of, if you went to 100 companies and says, what does payroll big data look like to you? 80% will say we're excited about it and we're doing something about it and it's great. But if you say, what does it really look like? I think a lot of people wouldn't be able to answer it. And that's where, you know, for me, the market is about helping every company define what that needs to look like. You know, in our experience, I can come to somebody and say, this is the type of stuff you need to be looking at and the type of thing you need to be thinking about. And that's naturally because, you know, we're talking to more companies, so we have a much wider view and sphere of influence as to what that looks like. It's difficult for companies to say what big data looks like to them, because big data is still a slightly romantic notion where people like the idea of it, they know kind of what they want to get, they don't necessarily how to go about doing it, and they don't necessarily know exactly what the end state of it looks like. So big data is something that will continue to evolve. For me, it's very important that we're driving that in terms of what companies need to know, because, as I say, if you ask a lot of payroll people or C-suite people, what do I want to know about my people, they're naturally going to probably translate that to what they can get as opposed to what they should get. And that's something that we'll see evolving an awful lot over the next few years.